Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
Have you heard of glimmers? They're the opposite of triggers, which puts you in a state of re-experiencing something traumatic. A glimmer is something that sparks delight in your day unexpectedly. Verywell Mind calls it a cue, either internal or external, that brings one back to a sense of joy or safety. Hi, I'm Jen. This is the Bible for Busy People, and a glimmer could be spotting a beautiful flower on your walk, or catching the scent of a favorite smell, a kind word from a friend, or coming across a familiar poem or song. Glimmers tell me that while there are ways our bodies instantly react to the hard things we've been through, our bodies also soften and feel safe with certain cues. And those cues come from God. God meets us where we are. We're reading about Elijah today in 1 Kings chapter 19. Starting in verse 1, it says, "Now Ahab had told Jezebel everything Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, 'May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them.'" Elijah was understandably afraid and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. "I have had enough, Lord," he said. "Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors." Then he lay down under the bush and fell asleep. All at once an angel touched him and said, "Get up and eat." He looked around, and there by his head was some bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and drank and then lay down again. The angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, "Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you." So he got up and ate and drank. Strengthened by that food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. There he went into a cave and spent the night. Isn't it so typical for mountaintop moments to become valleys of despair? After calling the Israelites back to God, you might have expected a celebration or at least a break from the challenges, right? But very quickly, Elijah's life was at risk again, threatened by Jezebel. And so Elijah was on the run, alone again. He went out into the wilderness. As we've talked about in past episodes, wilderness seasons in the Bible represent times of trial as well as transformation, and it's often a place where God shows up with provision. Elijah takes refuge under a broom bush, which at the time represented shelter, fuel, and even food. Elijah's vulnerable prayer cracks something open in me. I can struggle with depression too, and I have found myself speaking some pretty devastating words in my own prayers. God didn't answer this prayer of Elijah's. In fact, ever. Elijah was taken up to heaven. He didn't physically pass away. Elijah also fell back on his own feelings of unworthiness. Even though he had just had this wonderful moment of victory, he faced his own insecurities too. God heard Elijah in this moment and sent rest and food and water through an angel. It wasn't too long ago that I shared about losing a beloved family member, and the grief of it felt like it was going to take me out sometimes. But then unexpectedly, God sent glimmers, moments of joy and relief in the pain. Those glimmers were enough to get me through that hard time, and I have seen it many times since as well. God provides. And as this story with Elijah proves, sometimes what you need is simple. A physical need that you can meet in the moment, like a rest and a bite to eat. Elijah was revived with this. He even traveled to Horeb, the same mountain where Moses met with God. Also, the number 40 is associated in the Bible with time spent in the wilderness. In this instance, it's 40 days, which may or may not be an exact number, but it's more symbolic. I think there's something here about Elijah going to meet with God, willingly entering the wilderness because that's where God is. Skipping down to, again, verse 9, the second part, it says, "And the word of the Lord came to him. 'What are you doing here, Elijah?' He replied, 'I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too.' The Lord said, 'Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by.' Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. And again, God asks him what he's doing there, and he replies with something very similar. In verse 15, the Lord said to him, "Go back the way you came and go to the desert of Damascus. When you get there, anoint Hazael king over Aram. Also anoint Jehu son of Nimshi king over Israel, and anoint Elisha son of Shaphat from Abel-Meholah to succeed you as prophet. Jehu will put to death any who escape the sword of Hazael, and Elisha will put to death any who escape the sword of Jehu. Yet I reserve 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed down to Baal and whose mouths have not kissed him." God heard Elijah's concerns and met with him personally, hearing him out again. This scene is a callback to God meeting with Moses before the Israelites in the desert, which was 40 years. At that time, there were powerful signs, and then God went to speak to Moses face to face as with a friend. We see God's power on full display here. In some of the commentaries I read, what is implied is that the acts of power are meant to prepare hearts for God, while God's voice itself is gentle, reflective of God's character. It is a still, small voice. Again, what stands out to me here is God meeting Elijah with gentleness, not correcting him or acting frustrated about a lack of faith. It is God's character to meet us where we are, to be patient and gentle, to care. God gave Elijah something to do to move past this moment of despair, but it's also interesting what he gave him to do. He was enlisting people to be part of the cause of removing Ahab from power and restoring Israel. He would have allies moving forward, the very thing he worried he was without. And God confirmed 7,000 faithful believers. Elijah was not alone. Right after this, Elijah went and called Elisha in his own interesting way. You'll have to go back and read it. But I look at this and see all the ways God met Elijah in the wilderness of despair. He met him with providing for physical needs, spoke to him with gentleness, gave him purpose, and encouraged him with support, that he wasn't alone. To receive consolation from God, we have to go through the desolation first. But how amazing is it that God shows up for us, meeting us with what we need to make it through the season? And we don't have to skip our emotions to get to the good part. God hears our struggles. We don't have to fix ourselves before we go to God. When things feel desolate, what helps you to feel consoled? I find it often involves a mix of things: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. How does it feel that you have someone on your side in the most challenging times? I'll leave you with that. Let's talk again tomorrow. If you are listening to this podcast, I'm going to assume two things about you. First of all, that you're a busy person, and second, that you are in need of a restful break. Cannon Beach Conference Center is the place for a beautiful coastal retreat. Whether it's one of their enriching conferences or your own church or ministry event, you can find out more at 800-745-1546 or visit cbcc.net. Thank you to Cannon Beach Conference Center for sponsoring the Bible for Busy People.
Thank you for listening to The Bible for Busy People. If you need prayer or want to go deeper in your faith, visit our show notes. Will you take a moment to share with a friend and leave a review? It helps the Bible get into even more people's minds and hearts. Find more podcasts that will recharge you at purposely.com.